Hi friends, I'm here in the art room today by myself and you're at school today, but I'm not. So I'm going to show you how to make an artwork today on the video, on the TV. So you can follow along with me and we're going to draw a picture. We're going to draw a picture of a landscape. We've probably already talked about what landscapes are because they're a very popular subject in art. When people like to look at nature outside and then they paint a picture or draw a picture or make a sculpture that looks like that, then that's a landscape. So we're going to draw a landscape today and we're just going to use lines. So we're focusing on lines. Lines are something we use whenever we draw or whenever we write. So we're going to use those lines today to make a beautiful landscape like the one I made here. It might not look just like mine, and that's fine because different landscapes look differently. This is a famous artist whose name is Ted Harrison, and he's sitting in front of one of his paintings of a landscape, and he used a lot of lines too. There's lots of different parts to the landscape, and he used lines to create all those different parts. There's 3 parts to his painting. That each one have a different frame. So it's a picture that's divided up into 3 different parts. This one has some foxes, and this part has some people and dogs. And then there's a big lake here in the middle. So there's different parts to his landscape. But he used just lines and spaces of color to make this beautiful big landscape. He's painted and drawn a lot of other landscapes too. These are all by the same artist, Ted Harrison. He lives in Canada, which is close to America. Very close. But it's not American. So he's not an American artist. He's a Canadian artist. And he's a very talented man. Well, we're going to create our landscape by using lines. And it's a lot the same way that he did. So we can learn from him. We can learn from famous artists. So we're just going to draw with a pencil. And we're going to use paper. So your substitute teacher can pass out the papers. And when you get it, the first thing you'll need to do is what we always do when I'm there. What do we do first when we get a new sheet of paper to draw on? Yes, write your name on the back and then turn it over. So the substitute can now pause the video and everybody will write your name on your paper and turn your paper over so we can start drawing together. Unpause when everybody's ready, please. Thank you. Mr. Freddy is in the hall and being very noisy today. He's funny. So hopefully everybody has your name on the paper, and you can turn that paper long across because most landscapes are longer across than they are tall, unless you're looking at something really long and tall like a big tall tree or a big tall mountain. Most of the time when you look outside, you see the land spread out to the sides. It goes out sideways more than it goes up and down. So we need our paper turned long across to look like a normal landscape usually. Some landscapes could be taller up and down, and some of Ted Harrison's were tall up and down, and some were long across. It just depends on what you're looking at. Well, let's start with our paper turned across. That's actually called the landscape direction with art, and we're making a landscape. So let's turn it landscape direction. All right, we're going to use our pencils, and we're going to draw a line that shows the top of some hills. It's a little bit below the middle, so we don't want it to be too high or we won't have enough room to put some mountains behind the hills. But let's start way over on the side of our paper. Put your pencil on the side of your paper. And we're going to draw a line that's curving up and down across the paper, like the tops of some rolling hills. Just make it go from one side all the way over to the other side of your paper, curving all the way across. We don't want it to stop before it gets to the other side. All right, now we're going to draw some lines to look like mountains behind the hills. And some of these could be kind of curvy, or some mountains might be more pointy, where they come to a real sharp point like a volcano, and that would make it more of a zigzag line. But let's start over on the side of our paper, and you can make it curvy or pointy, and then make it go down to the line that you drew first. So it runs into the hill that's underneath. So make it stop where it touches the line at the bottom. And it looks like that mountain or hill is just behind the other one going on behind there where we can't see it. Okay, Let's do the same thing on the other side. This one might be taller than the first one. Start on the other side, and it could be pointy, like a zigzag, or it can be curvy, and make it run into the line in the middle. So the lines are running into each other in the middle. They're crossing each other, and it looks like the mountains are behind each other in different places. So now I've got some hills at the front, and then some mountains in the middle. In a landscape, we actually have different parts. We say this is the front or the foreground. This is the middle or the middle ground. And then in the back, it's called the background. So we could draw something in the background. It could be another mountain or a volcano, or it could be the sun. I drew the sun in this one with just a half of a circle shape. So if you want to make it look like the sun is coming up over the mountains or setting behind the mountains, all you need to draw is a little curve for the top of the sun. But I could also make it look like a volcano, and I'm going to make this one look like a volcano coming up in the back behind the other mountains. So the lines just run into the lines on the sides of the mountains. It's not real pointy. Sometimes a volcano is pointier, so I'm going to make it pointier. And then erase that other line I drew for the top. Volcanoes are usually really tall and pointy on top. Yours does not have to be a volcano, but if you want to draw it, you can. It could look like the one I drew here with the sun on the top. Or you could draw another mountain back there if you want to have mountains far, far away. Like those mountains are stretching out for miles and miles, on and on forever. And sometimes they look like they do that. Okay, so we only need to have 4 lines. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 on mine. Count yours and make sure you only have 4 lines. We don't need to draw a lot of different lines with our pencil. At this point, we're just going to draw 4 lines with our pencil. All right, and then we're going to use some markers to add colors, 1 color in each different section of our landscape. So, like I used green on the hills on this section, and then I used orange in this part, and I used purple on this part, and then I used blue in the sky and yellow on the sun. So I used 5 different colors in that landscape to make each section look different so you can see each part of the landscape better. And that's one thing that Ted Harrison did too. He used different colors in different parts and different sections and made it very colorful and interesting to look at. So I'm going to choose a color for the bottom, the foreground. It could be green like grass. It could be brown like dirt. It could be any color I want. It doesn't even have to be a realistic looking color. Because you're the artist, you can change the colors and make them look as real as you want or as interesting and fantastical, like a fantasy picture if you want. I'm going to use orange on the first section, so I'm going to trace the first line at the bottom that we drew first with orange. And then I know that that whole section is going to be orange. We're not just going to color the whole space in orange, though. We're going to use lines to color it. So I'm going to draw a line under that line that's just like the first one, curving up and down in the same places. And that's what I want you to do. You choose your first color, trace that line, then you're going to draw the same line curving up and down underneath the first one, and then again and again. We want these lines to be close together but not touching. So try not to let them run into each other. They're going to curve up and down in the same places, but not touch each other. So they're not crisscrossing each other, they're not running into each other. If they do run into each other, that's okay. Just go down to the next line and try to make the next one not touch the new one. So the new one's not touching the others. If you run off the paper, that's fine. Just draw the part that fits. So down here at the bottom, I only need to draw the curvy parts on one side and the curvy parts on the other. Try to keep the lines as close as you can without letting them touch each other. So I made the section at the bottom orange on mine. What color did you use? Did you use a different color or orange? Because you can use any color you want for that first section, but just one color. When you're done with that first bottom part of our landscape, then we'll go on to the next part. So if the substitute teacher would like to pause the video until everybody's ready, you can do that. And then when we're all ready, we can start back up together. All right, hopefully you have your first part at the bottom of your landscape finished. If you don't, you need to hurry to catch up because we're going to do the second part. So the second line that we drew when we were drawing our landscape, we're going to trace it with a color. I used green this time. And then we're going to draw the same line under that line until it runs into the bottom one. We're not going to let it cross the bottom ones. So each line is doing the same thing the line we drew at the top did, and it's not running into the line at the bottom. It's not running over it. I mean, it's running into it. It stops when it gets to it, but it does not cross over it. So you're not making crisscross lines. Each line is separate, not touching another line. So you choose what color you want for your second part of your landscape in the middle ground. Trace the line first and then draw that same line under it over and over as many times as you can until you get down to the front part, the foreground, where we drew another part of our landscape. When you finish that second part, then we'll do the third part. We'll do the third line with another color. So each time you're going to choose a different color. I'm going to choose red next. If you're not done with the second one, you can finish that first. But I'm going to go ahead and draw my third line. And this one is kind of a zigzag, so every time I draw the line under the first one, it's going to have to zig up and down the same place as the first one did to make it look like that mountain that was real zigzaggy in the background. Zigging and zagging up and down. Now if it runs into the bottom part, it's not going to cross it. It's going to stop when it gets to the other lines and not crisscrossing each other. So all the lines are separated from each other. They're not touching each other. And they just stop when they run into each other. Okay, I've got the third part on mine done. If you're still working on yours, that's fine. You can keep working on yours while I'm making mine. I think I'll use purple for the last mountain, which is the volcano on mine. And I need to trace the line at the top of my volcano. If you drew the sun, just trace the line at the top of the sun, probably a half circle shape. If you drew another mountain back there, just trace the top of the mountain. And then you're going to do the same thing with your line underneath. So if you drew the half circle, just draw another half circle shape underneath. It just keeps going down and down until it runs into another line. It's very simple. Just making that space filled up with lines that don't touch each other. Try to keep them close together, but don't let them touch each other. The only space I have left in mine is the sky, and I'm just going to use a color for the sky. It could be a sunset or sunrise in the sky. It doesn't just have to be blue. It could even be black if you want to make black lines to look like nighttime in your picture. I think for this one I'm going to use yellow because I haven't used any bright yellow yet. And I'm going to fill in the spaces at the top by making the same line as the top of my mountains and volcano over and over. Just going to repeat that line going up and down in the same places till it runs right off the sides of my paper. So I'm filling up the sky space with lines that are not touching each other and not touching the other lines. Can you see that yellow? It's kind of light. And that landscape is finished. So when you're finished with yours, you can raise your hand and show the substitute teacher. If you finish early, you can free draw. I'd love to see your landscapes tomorrow or when I come back to school to see how well you did. Bye.